In this video, I wanted to go over something that I think is overlooked a lot when people buy used Toyotas. There is an Achilles heel for Toyota that doesn't always show up in the reliability reports. So what is it? Frame rust. And I'm going to tell you the years that are the most affected and quickly how to check for it. Now, many people talk about these old Tacomas, and this was a big deal online about, 10 or 15 years ago. That's not really what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about the newer Tacomas and also the newer Sequoias, Tundras, all of the other vehicles that Toyota has up until about 2010 that could be affected. Toyota actually had a class action lawsuit, and most people know about this, but they actually don't know that it didn't just affect the Tacomas, but it also affected the Sequoias 2005 to 2008 and also the 2007 to 2008 Tundras. Additionally, you Toyota fans will also remember the 01 to 03 Tundras for the frame rust issues, and there's a lot of vehicles that aren't listed in here. One that comes to mind was a popular one, the FJ Cruiser, and I've actually just saw a listing here on Facebook Marketplace for an FJ Cruiser that was listed for $4,800 or something like that. And it's all due to the fact that the frame is completely rusted out. Here's an example of another FJ that I found. It says this FJ is priced accordingly because of the rust on the cross member and some on the frame. He says he wouldn't hesitate to drive it anywhere, but this is something that you have to check out for yourself. Someone, in states like Colorado, New Mexico, other states, I don't believe there's car inspections. If you live somewhere back east, like Rhode Island or New York, a lot of these states do forced car inspections and they'll catch these frame inspections or brake problems or tire problems. But in many states, they don't do that. So you're allowed to buy and sell vehicles without an inspection. And it's kind of up to the buyer to have some due diligence in that. So you have to be really careful. And that's what I'll show you now, what to look out for. So how do you check for frame rust? What you want to do is get under the car, and I'm going to show you some pictures here from another YouTube video. And I'm going to link this video below in the description if you're interested in watching the whole thing. I'll just kind of do the abbreviated summary of it here. As you can see where this light is shining, that is the frame of the car. This frame actually doesn't look too bad in the video. It's a pretty clean frame. The exhaust looks a little bit rusty. Overall, it looks pretty good on the frame. Now, if you're buying a car that's been on a lot of gravel roads or off-road a lot, as you can see here, this little rusted out spot is the leaf spring on this car, and that's attached to the frame. Towards the back of the vehicle is a really key place to look for rust. It tends to collect a lot of the rocks and debris, and it knocks a lot of the paint off the frame. And then once the paint's gone and the undercoating's gone on the frame, it starts to rust. Now, another little tip you can do is just kind of rub the frame like he's doing there with this cloth. And a lot of the time, if you might need to scrape it with a putty knife or something, but just scrape it a little bit to identify what's under that dirt and just to get a really good idea if it's rusted or if it's actually black and still solid steel underneath. And as you can imagine, you really want to inspect all of the pieces of the frame and where the frame connects side to side on the vehicle. So the frames are generally built front to back, and then they connect side to side from the passenger side to the driver's side. And all of these connecting points that are shown here in this video are just good areas to check. They're really the key points that are highlighted in red there that connect to the frame. They connect your suspension to the frame, and those are the safety items that you really want to inspect. And the last tip that you can do is if you've got a little snake camera or a plumbing camera or anything that you could jam into the frame, just find a hole like they're finding here in this photo. And what you're trying to do is get inside the frame and look inside to see if it's rusted from the inside out. A lot of the time, the water and moisture sits inside the frame like you see here, and you end up with rust in the bottom, and you can't visibly see it from the outside. Some rust is normal. It's going to be normal in any used car, but you just don't want excessive rust flaking, and you don't want to see holes in the frame that weren't there from the factory. I'll link this video down in the description below, and you can watch the whole thing if you want. So just to recap the models, obviously any of the late 90s Tacomas, but I would look at the frame really in detail on pretty much any of the trucks from Toyota from 2000 to 2010. I would take a very detailed look. So whether it's the Tacoma, the Sequoia, the 4Runner, the FJ, any of them, don't overlook it. It happened to all of them. Even if they weren't involved in this recall, I've seen plenty of listings online. I've seen them in person for myself. The frame's completely rusted out. A lot of people overlook the vehicles that aren't included in a recall. I've done it myself. I've looked at Toyotas before to purchase them, and because they weren't involved in the rust recall, I thought they were safe. And then when I got into the vehicle, I found out that they were completely rusted out. So number one, if you live in the Rust Belt, triple check the frame and the cross members and pretty much all of the suspension parts. If it wasn't undercoated and taken care of and wasn't garaged, you might end up with an issue. Secondly, just look at the video below. If you're in the hunt for a Toyota, you can still use the reliability ratings as a good guide, but just double check maybe on a Carfax or an AutoCheck report where the vehicle came from. You can look at the history. If it's spent a lot of time in the Rust Belt and you live in a dry climate state, you still want to double check. You just have to do some due diligence and make sure you're getting a good one.